Hey guys, I'm so excited to be back and to see you all again. It's been an amazing journey so far, and I can't wait to dive into today's topic with all of you. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, subscribe to help support the channel. Your engagement means the world to me, and it really helps the channel grow. Let's make this community even bigger. Let's get started. Imagine being in a crowded room and yet no one sees you. Not because you're socially invisible, we've all been there, but because you're literally invisible. A ghost in plain sight, a walking whisper. Now, before you start reaching for your acceptance letter to Hogwarts or tinkering with alien technology, let's dial it back a bit. Today, we're diving into something that has fascinated humans for centuries. The cloak of invisibility, or rather, the not quite cloak of invisibility. It's a story about magic, science, mischief, misunderstanding, and a deep human desire to disappear, just for a little while. Long before we had laboratories and light-bending polymers, we had legends, and oh, the stories humans told. The Greeks had the helm of Hades, slip it on and you vanished from the eyes of gods and mortals alike. That's right, the god of the underworld had a stealth mode. In Norse mythology, Loki occasionally disappears when he's up to no good. Typical trickster behavior. In Chinese folklore, monks and martial artists were said to possess the ability to hide their qi and vanish. Even in medieval Europe, tales were spun about wizards with cloaks that could hide them from sight. Were these literal cloaks or metaphorical ones? Either way, the message was clear. Invisibility was powerful, but it came with mystery and often trouble. We didn't just crave the ability to vanish. We were obsessed with the idea that some people already could. Fast forward to the 1800s and 1900s. Invisibility was still off the menu for scientists, but not for magicians. Theaters filled with gasps and applause as performers pulled off vanishing acts that seemed to defy reason. Mirrors, trapdoors, sleight of hand, clever lighting, human ingenuity turned the impossible into entertainment. Famous illusionists like Harry Houdini may not have actually disappeared, but he mastered the art of making you think he did. The desire to vanish wasn't just about escape, it was performance, mystery, control. And while no one walked out of those theaters truly invisible, everyone walked out believing it was possible. The 20th century brought science into the game. No more tricks. Now we had equations and experiments. The key idea? Light. More specifically, controlling how it interacts with objects. If you can bend light around something, you can make it seem as if it's not there. Enter metamaterials, engineered substances that can redirect electromagnetic waves. Scientists began experimenting with these in the early 2000s, and for the first time, invisibility felt like a real possibility. A Japanese researcher, Susumu Tachi, developed a retro-reflective projection system that made the wearer appear see-through when viewed from the front. It wasn't perfect, and you needed a projector behind you, but hey, it worked. Meanwhile, military interest in cloaking technology exploded. From stealth bombers to infrared camouflage, invisibility got a very serious, very classified makeover. If you want to know how close we are to real invisibility, follow the money. Or, more specifically, follow the military. In Canada, a company called Hyperstealth Biotechnology claims to have developed quantum stealth, a material that bends light in such a way that objects behind it become nearly invisible. The exact science remains secret, but demo videos show it hiding people and even vehicles. Other research groups have developed cloaking techniques using thermal masking, sound suppression, and even radar evasion. But there's a catch. Most of these only work under specific conditions, specific angles, specific wavelengths. Invisibility is still, in many ways, a trick of perspective. The closer we get to true cloaking, the more we realize how slippery it is. Let's take a break from the science and peek at what's been happening on our screens. Harry Potter's cloak of invisibility wasn't just a tool for sneaking into the library after hours, it was a symbol of safety, legacy, and eventually mortality. In The Invisible Man, invisibility becomes a metaphor for power without accountability, and the horror that can follow. Video games let us toggle invisibility like a power-up. Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Metal Gear Solid. In those moments, we become untouchable. Hunters in the shadows. Why do we love invisibility so much? Because it represents freedom. control, a way to step out of the gaze of a world that's always watching. But it also reveals our darker fantasies. The desire to act without being seen often brings up uncomfortable questions. In Plato's Republic, there's a thought experiment about the ring of Gyges. A shepherd finds a ring that makes him invisible and immediately begins to lie, steal, and murder. Plato asked, if you could get away with anything, would you still be good? It's a question that still haunts the idea of invisibility. Would you sneak into a concert, a vault, someone's private moments? Invisibility isn't just a fantasy, it's a test of ethics. What would you do if no one could see you? The answer says less about magic and more about morality. Today, you don't need a cloak to disappear. You just log off. Online, we manage our visibility with profiles, privacy settings, and disappearing messages. We ghost, we lurk, we vanish from group chats. We even wear digital cloaks, VPNs, fake names, filters. Being seen and unseen is now part of everyday life. Sometimes being invisible is power. Other times, it's protection. But always, it's a choice. A modern magic trick we've learned to master. So why do we care so much about invisibility? Because sometimes the world is too loud, too bright, too demanding. Invisibility is rest. It's peace. It's the ability to just be for a moment without being judged, noticed, or defined. But we also want to be seen, truly seen. So we walk this strange line, craving the power to disappear while aching to be visible in the ways that matter most. The cloak of invisibility, whether in legend, lab, or library, is more than a gadget. It's a mirror. It shows us who we are when no one's looking. It asks us who we want to be when the lights are off. It lets us play in the shadow and maybe find ourselves in the quiet. So next time you wish you could vanish, ask yourself this. Do you really want to disappear, or do you just want to be seen on your own terms? You're stuck in traffic. Again, the kind of traffic where even the birds seem to be moving faster than you. You look to your left, somebody's sighing into their coffee. You look to your right, someone's scrolling through their phone, eyes glazed. And suddenly you wonder, what if I just lifted off the ground? Not in a plane, not in a drone, just me and a propeller pack strapped to my back. Welcome to the wonderful, wacky world of the pedestrian propeller pack. Half daydream, half doomed invention, and somehow completely serious. We've always wanted to fly, not as passengers, as pilots of our own tiny sky. For thousands of years, we've looked up and wondered, why not me? From Icarus to Da Vinci, we've dreamt, sketched, and leapt off barns in pursuit of personal flight. But something strange happened in the 20th century. We got planes, jets, rockets, and suddenly flying felt less like a miracle and more like a commute. So our imagination shifted. What if flight could be casual? What if it was personal? What if it was wearable? Enter the propeller pack, a glorious buzzing, humming machine attached to your back, like a blender with delusions of grandeur. It's not quite a jetpack. It's gentler, goofier, a little more homemade, and it represents something very human, the desire to rise above the mundane, literally and figuratively. Throughout the mid-1900s, inventors from garages to government labs tried to build wearable flight devices. Some went with rockets, loud, explosive, and not exactly pedestrian-friendly. Others, though, tried a softer approach. Why not a spinning propeller? Why not take inspiration from helicopters, not missiles? The result was a series of bizarre, beautiful, and mostly impractical flying machines. One of the most famous was the Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee, a flying platform developed by the U.S. Army in the 1950s. It had ducted fans and a standing platform, essentially a flying hovercraft, but it was too hard to control and the Army gave up on it. Then there was the Williams X-Jet, a tiny flying chair that made its pilots look like lawn gnomes in midair. And for every military prototype, there were dozens of DIY tinkerers, people who bolted lawnmower engines to backpack frames and trusted their lives to duct tape and dreams. The pedestrian propeller pack is a cousin of those dreams. It never really took off, at least not in the sky, but it soared in cartoons, comics, and kids' imaginations. Inspector Gadget had one. So did George Jetson. Even Super Mario sometimes took to the air with a propeller hat. Why do we love this image so much? Because it's funny, and because it feels like something you could actually do. You don't need a launch pad, just a running start and a little bit of crazy. But the real magic of the pedestrian propeller pack isn't in the tech. It's in the spirit, the refusal to be stuck, The insistence that movement, no matter how absurd, is better than stagnation. Today, we have hoverboards that don't hover, scooters with more speed than stability, and electric unicycles that look like science fiction fever dreams. We may never have wearable flight for the masses, but that hasn't stopped us from trying, because deep down, we're all still stuck in traffic somewhere, looking at the sky and thinking, what if I just flew away? Picture this. You walk into a doctor's office in the 1800s. You're pale, sweaty, and a bit nervous. Maybe you have a headache or a sore back, or you're just feeling vaguely unwell. The doctor nods, strokes his beard thoughtfully, and then reaches for a jar of live leeches. Now, imagine he doesn't place them gently by hand. No. He wheels out a polished brass contraption. Gears click, valves hiss, a tiny arm extends, precisely placing a wriggling leech onto your neck like some medical steampunk octopus. Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the automatic leech applicator, perhaps the most wonderfully weird medical device history almost forgot. This invention didn't emerge from satire. It was real, or at least proposed with complete seriousness. In the 19th century, leeches were medical royalty. Bloodletting wasn't just common, it was standard. Leeches were believed to restore balance to the body's four humors. If you were rich, fashionable, or even remotely ill, chances were good that you'd be leech treated at some point. And the demand? Massive. Apothecaries in Paris were said to use millions of leeches a year. Doctors carried them in tins like cigars. So naturally, someone decided this process needed automation. Enter the automatic leech applicator. Imagine a cross between a music box and a medieval torture device, except it gently placed leeches instead of playing a tune or cracking bones. It was built to make the whole ordeal cleaner, more precise, and, perhaps most importantly, more modern. Because even in a world obsessed with bleeding people out, there was still a desire for efficiency and flair. This device, absurd as it may sound today, represented a moment when medicine and machinery were becoming best friends. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just reshaping factories, it was transforming surgery, diagnosis, and yes, blood-sucking. The automatic leech applicator never reached mass production, but it found its way into medical exhibitions and bizarre patent books. It was discussed with the same straight face given to scalpels and stethoscopes. But let's not laugh too soon, because buried beneath the absurdity is something oddly admirable, a belief that we could engineer healing. That precision in gears might somehow bring comfort, and maybe a little bit of order to the messiness of human illness. Today, the leech has made a small comeback. Yes, really. In microsurgery and reconstructive procedures, leeches help improve blood flow. Hospitals now have refrigerated leech banks, but alas, they are still applied by hand. No tiny brass arms, no hiss of steam. Still, the idea lives on in cartoons, in oddball history books, in that peculiar corner of the internet where people collect images of antique surgical tools and wonder, what were they thinking? The automatic leech applicator is a symbol of something deeper than weird medicine. It's about how far we'll go to turn discomfort into routine, how we try to mechanize even the most organic and squirmy parts of life. It asks, with total sincerity, what if a machine could do the gross part for us? Let's step back in time for a moment. The early 1800s were awash in medical theories, and not all of them held up. But one thing they had in abundance? Confidence. Physicians of the day believed they understood the human body well enough to interfere boldly, often bloodily. Enter the golden age of bloodletting. Leeches were the star tool of this period. They were elegant, sort of, self-contained, and, most importantly, they did the dirty work themselves. No blades, no bowls, no measuring. Just a little bite, some suction, and voila, you were on the road to balance. As their popularity soared, so did the problems. Handling live leeches was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes unhygienic. They squirmed, they wandered, they fell off. Doctors began to crave a better way, a cleaner way, a way that involved less touching. And in an era when clockwork birds and steam-powered bathtubs were becoming reality, the idea of a mechanical leech dispenser didn't seem quite so outlandish. Inventors envisioned devices that could store, select, and apply leeches in one smooth motion. Just a pull of a lever and you'd get a perfectly placed parasite on your temple. Very civilized. Patent archives reveal actual sketches, delicate arms, spring-loaded trays, tiny suction chambers, all designed not to reduce the horror, but to organize it. because this wasn't about rejecting leeches. It was about making them modern. And so the automatic leech applicator took shape, a product of necessity, ambition, and a touch of mechanical vanity. Even as the practice of bloodletting began to wane, thanks to growing skepticism and eventually germ theory, the applicator lingered in the collective imagination. It was featured in satirical cartoons, referenced in fiction, even lovingly rebuilt by steampunk hobbyists in modern times. In one memorable 19th century French cartoon, a dignified gentleman reclines as a servant winds up a clunky metal machine. The leech is delicately lowered onto his forehead like a crown jewel. It's absurd. It's elegant. And it perfectly captures the contradiction of the age, a time when people embraced both progress and superstition with equal enthusiasm. The applicator became more than just a gadget. It became a metaphor for our desire to sanitize discomfort, for our belief that technology can always make things better, even when the thing itself might be questionable. It also became a symbol of medicine's flirtation with automation. If we could mechanize diagnosis, surgery, even healing, could we also mechanize empathy? That was a question the Victorian age didn't ask, but one we're still wrestling with now. The leech, of course, survived the applicator. It quietly slipped back into obscurity for most of the 20th century, until microsurgeons discovered their unique talent, restoring venous circulation in delicate procedures. In other words, they were back in hospitals, quietly, effectively, still squirming. But never forget, behind every expertly applied surgical leech, there was once a dream of gears, brass arms, and hissing steam. A dream that said, you shouldn't have to place that leech yourself. We've got a machine for that. And in that dream, absurd, charming, strangely touching, we see ourselves, always inventing, always optimizing, even when it comes to worms with teeth. Laughter is supposed to be the most human thing in the world. A reflex, a release, a ripple of joy that escapes before we can stop it. But what if you could measure it, rate it, record it? What if, in the middle of a comedy show or a conversation, a small machine quietly clicked and told you, that was a 6.5? Meet the laugh-o-meter, a wonderfully absurd attempt to quantify something beautifully unquantifiable. It sounds like something out of a cartoon, and in fact, it is. But it's also real, or at least real enough to be dreamed up in laboratories, embedded in television studios, and sketched into patents by people who seriously asked, can we automate the sound of joy? The idea of a laugh-measuring device began, unsurprisingly, during the golden age of radio and television. Producers wanted to know, what made audiences laugh the most? When did they lose interest? Could laughter be tracked like ratings or sales figures? Enter the first versions of the laugh-o-meter. Some were rudimentary, essentially decibel meters repurposed to spike when audience laughter crossed a certain threshold. Others were more complex, attempting to filter out background noise and even differentiate chuckles from belly laughs. None were truly accurate, but all were gloriously optimistic. And then came the studio laugh track, a way of manufacturing laughter instead of measuring it. It was the inverse of the laugh-o-meter, a machine to simulate joy when none occurred naturally. Ironically, this only made the laugh-o-meter feel more necessary. If we're faking laughter, shouldn't we at least know what's real? Over the years, the concept evolved. Tech enthusiasts tried to build apps that could measure laughter during stand-up sets. One Japanese inventor in the early 2000s even created a robotic doll that laughed when others did, then rated their laughter back. The device, complete with blinking lights and a slightly creepy grin, didn't sell well, but it lived on in viral videos and art exhibits, forever blinking, forever judging. The laugh-o-meter, in all its forms, sits at the intersection of joy and control. It asks whether something as fleeting and intimate as a laugh can be measured, and whether we even want it to be. Because deep down, we all want to be funny. We want our jokes to land, our stories to sparkle, and somewhere inside us lives a tiny imaginary dial, measuring the reactions of everyone we meet. The laugh-o-meter isn't just a device. It's a mirror, a reminder that we crave feedback, even for the most spontaneous parts of ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, it's okay to laugh at that too. Some inventions solve problems, some make life easier. And then there's the dog-powered butter churn. Picture a quiet farm in the 1800s. The morning sun spills over rolling fields. A woman in a bonnet is baking bread. A man mends a fence. And near the barn, a small dog trots endlessly in a circle, tethered to a mechanical arm. Round and round it goes, powering a churn that turns cream into butter. It sounds like a scene from a quirky children's book or a deleted episode of Wallace and Gromit. But this was a real thing, or at least real enough to be patented, built, and sold. Because once upon a time, someone looked at a tub of cream, a tired human arm, and a particularly energetic terrier, and saw an opportunity. The dog-powered butter churn was born in an era when energy was precious and time was muscle-powered. Every chore, every meal, every task was manual. People churned butter by hand, slowly, rhythmically, and for what felt like forever. So, when early American inventors began to experiment with harnessing animal power for domestic work, they didn't stop at oxen and horses. Dogs, especially medium-sized, restless farm dogs, became ideal candidates for treadmill-driven gadgets. Not just churns, but sewing machines, butter mixers, sausage grinders. If it could spin, stomp, or stir, someone tried hooking a dog up to it. One of the most famous designs came with a miniature treadmill angled just so. The dog would climb aboard, the incline would encourage movement, and as the treadmill turned, gears would transfer that energy to a central churning device. Butter would begin to form. The dog would get a workout. Everyone, except maybe the dog, would be happy. The logic was simple. Why waste human labor when your spaniel is already bouncing off the walls? The device never quite reached mainstream status, but it lived a vibrant life in agricultural fairs, hardware catalogs, and strange old patent books. It became a symbol, not just of innovation, but of that peculiar human tendency to overcomplicate the simple in the name of progress. The dog-powered butter churn has since disappeared from barns, but not from memory. It survives in museum exhibits and historical reenactments. It pops up in cartoons, in oddball history lists, and in the collective imagination of anyone who's ever looked at a hyperdog and thought, you should be doing something useful. Like so many bizarre inventions, it tells us more about its creators than its function. It speaks to a time of relentless ingenuity, of homespun engineering, of a world where every ounce of motion mattered, and it raises a question that's both hilarious and oddly profound. If you had a dog, a treadmill, and some cream, would you? In popular culture, the dog-powered butter churn has become something of a comedic symbol, an object so oddly specific that it borders on the surreal. It's been referenced in cartoons like The Simpsons and Looney Tunes, where overly complex contraptions often include an animal doing an absurd task, typically while some hapless inventor stands nearby with a clipboard and exaggerated optimism. In animated films and children's books, machines powered by dogs are used to highlight the whimsy of what-if inventions. They're never the point of the story, but always the part people remember. A background gag, a throwaway line, a clever wink to a historical oddity that sounds too strange to be true. In fact, in graphic novels and steampunk art, the image of a dog on a treadmill turning gears has been co-opted as a symbol of old-world creativity. Equal parts nostalgic and nonsensical, it serves as a metaphor for the way we turn loyalty and enthusiasm, two of a dog's best qualities, into productive output. Even social media hasn't spared the butter churn. Memes have emerged. When your dog has too much energy, but you also need fresh dairy. And Etsy has been known to host ironic art prints of vintage butter churn blueprints, complete with trotting terriers drawn in Victorian style. Why does this image stick with us? Because it blends practicality with pure silliness, and because it raises a truth we don't often say out loud. Humans really, really want everything to have a function. That brings us to something deeper, something a little more psychological. There's a certain kind of logic, equal parts resourcefulness and restlessness, that drives people to mechanize anything that moves. If it walks, trots, spins, barks, or twitches, someone has tried to harness it. We don't just automate because we're lazy. We automate because we love control. We love the idea that chaos, even a four-legged tail-wagging kind of chaos, can be directed, channeled, optimized. Even joy, even energy, even instinct, these two must serve a purpose. The dog-powered butter churn embodies that mindset. It's not cruel, it's not even especially effective, but it's delightfully revealing. It shows how the human imagination rarely stops at can we. It rushes forward to how well can it work, and sometimes even can we patent it. And there's something charming in that urge, charm and urge, to look at your dog, your cream, your empty butter dish, and see potential. The world is full of motion. The human mind wants to catch it, gear it, and make it useful, even if it's just to churn a little joy into the breakfast table. Snoring, the soundtrack of marriage, the enemy of sleepovers, and the tiny nighttime crime we're all guilty of, or victims to. It starts as a soft rumble, then it builds, a wheeze, a gurgle, a full-blown nasal freight train, and then silence. Brief, terrifying, followed by a sharp snort that wakes everyone but the snorer. Now imagine, in the middle of that orchestra of nostrils, a sudden trumpet blast. Not a musical one, a medical one. Because once upon a time, someone actually invented the anti-snore trumpet, a device designed not to eliminate snoring, but to make it loud enough to fix itself. Yes, it existed. Or at least, the idea did. The anti-snore trumpet, sometimes known as a nasal trumpet or snore alarm, was proposed as a passive-aggressive miracle. It was a small, often rubber or metal tube inserted into the nostril with one unique feature. When snoring began, it would whistle or squeak, or, to the unfortunate bed partner's horror, emit a tiny trumpet-like sound. The theory was delightfully indirect. The sound wouldn't stop the snoring, but it might annoy the snorer enough to shift position or wake up just enough to breathe properly again. It was a blend of medicine and mischief, a cure not through comfort, but through confrontation. Like many inventions of the late 19th and early 20th century, it danced the line between sincere innovation and accidental comedy. The anti-snore trumpet found a home in medical catalogs, humorous magazines, and patent archives. It never caught on in hospitals, but it flourished in cartoons. Over the decades, the idea evolved into vibrating pillows, snore-detecting apps, and gentle headbands with motors that buzz when breathing goes off track. But none of them carried the pure comic audacity of a horn in the nose. In pop culture, the concept lived on. In classic comic strips, it appeared as a gag device in overly elaborate bedtime routines. In children's books, it showed up on grumpy uncles and napping bears. In sitcoms, it became a trope, the desperate spouse driven to absurd inventions just to reclaim a night's rest. But the anti-snore trumpet also reminds us of something tender beneath the laughter. That sleep, like love, requires compromise. That sometimes you endure a trumpet solo at 2 a.m. because you'd still rather be beside the snorer than alone in silence. And in that way, this silly little device joins the long list of human inventions born not just of discomfort, but of devotion. Before the science of sleep had stages and scans, it had suppositions and straps. In the 1800s and early 1900s, physicians and tinkerers alike proposed various devices to keep the snoring sleeper still, upright, or slightly terrified. There were chin straps that wrapped around the head like a harness. There were nose spreaders, tongue retainers, and even throat sprays made from questionable herbal extracts. One particularly memorable invention was the snore helmet, a leather headpiece with a built-in jaw hinge designed to keep the mouth shut entirely. Uncomfortable? Yes. Effective? Not really. But committed? Absolutely. Many of these devices didn't just aim to help the snorer, they aimed to protect the sleeper beside them, because snoring, unlike most medical conditions, is deeply communal. It affects relationships more than respiration. And that's why it has always drawn a strange mix of scientific attention and domestic desperation. As time passed, technology evolved, but human ingenuity stayed weird. Modern anti-snoring devices have taken the problem to new heights of innovation and absurdity. We now have smart pillows that shift your head mid-snore, CPAP machines that look like space gear, apps that record your snoring and rate it, mouth guards molded like dental retainers, nasal clips infused with mint, and even vibrating wristbands that buzz you into quiet. And yet, none have quite solved the problem entirely. Snoring remains a nighttime nemesis, but these gadgets tell us something essential. We never stop trying, even if the result is a glorified nose kazoo. Snoring's status as a comedic goldmine has made it a recurring character in pop culture. In Tom and Jerry, snoring is a setup for slapstick revenge. In The Flintstones, Fred's snoring becomes prehistoric thunder. And in The Simpsons, Homer's nasal rumblings are part of his charm and Marge's torment. In children's media, snoring is often exaggerated to animalistic extremes. Bears, dogs, even dragons are depicted sawing logs with each breath. It becomes a symbol of deep, content sleep and sometimes of blissful ignorance. In romantic comedies, snoring marks the transition from fantasy to reality. The charming date becomes the snoring boyfriend. The fairy tale ends with shared blankets and unexpected growls, and yet it's rarely portrayed as deal-breaking, just real. This is where the anti-snore trumpet lives on, not just as a device, but as a punchline, a symbol of the lengths we'll go for sleep and for love, which leads us into the psychology of it all. Sharing a bed with someone means sharing the rhythms of breath, the tossing of sheets, and yes, the occasional nocturnal symphony. Snoring becomes a stand-in for how we deal with each other's flaws. Can we laugh? Can we adapt? Can we put a tiny trumpet in someone's nose and still wake up with a smile? Studies have shown that couples who sleep well together report higher relationship satisfaction, but when sleep is disrupted, tensions rise. So many anti-snoring solutions are really relationship tools, ways to restore peace, preserve patience, and prove that comfort matters. Because deep down, even the weirdest inventions, the vibrating socks, the anti-snore pillows, the rubber trumpet, are expressions of care. They're attempts to protect both rest and relationship. And maybe that's why the anti-snore trumpet deserves a place in history. Not for its medical merit, but for its emotional one. It's a device that says, I love you, but if you don't stop snoring, I might lose my mind. And that's a sentence more of us understand than we'd like to admit. Pain has always inspired invention, and few pains match the particular agony of a bad tooth. Long before modern dentistry turned extractions into quick, numbed procedures, tooth pulling was brutal, messy, and horrifyingly public. But leave it to the inventors of the 19th century to approach this gruesome task with equal parts optimism, creativity, and excess machinery. Enter the steampunk tooth puller, a contraption that looks as though it belongs on the desk of a mad scientist rather than in a dental office. Imagine a device forged of polished brass and iron, adorned with unnecessary but aesthetically pleasing gears, levers, and pressure gauges. Instead of a simple pair of forceps, the patient faces a mechanical arm that clamps onto the offending tooth. With a controlled crank, or sometimes a foot pedal, the device gently or not so gently applies increasing pressure until the tooth is yanked free. The appeal was clear: precision, strength, the comforting illusion of science. After all, if machines could power factories and locomotives, why not make dentistry more efficient too? During the 1800s, a period obsessed with mechanization, inventors filed patents for all sorts of elaborate dental devices. Some used spring-loaded mechanisms to minimize human error. Others employed ratcheting gears to control the force applied. All promised to make extractions safer, faster, and most importantly, less dependent on the brute strength and shaky hands of the dentist. Yet, despite the genuine intentions behind these inventions, most patients remain skeptical. The sight of a giant, clicking, steam-powered arm reaching for their mouth often inspired more terror than trust. Unsurprisingly, the steampunk tooth puller became more of a historical curiosity than a clinical staple. While some prototypes saw limited use, most were abandoned as anesthetics and better tools emerged. But culturally, the image of the mechanical tooth puller has endured. In movies, cartoons, and novels set in steampunk universes, it's a perfect blend of horror and whimsy, an artifact of a time when people believed every problem could be solved with more gears. You'll find it in animated films where eccentric inventors create over-engineered solutions for simple problems, in steampunk literature where Victorian aesthetics meet futuristic ambition, even in video games where players can stumble across dusty mechanical clinics filled with menacing dental contraptions. The steampunk tooth puller reminds us of humanity's dual nature, our desire to master pain and our tendency to build machines that make us question our own sanity. And in a way, that makes it weirdly beautiful. Long before the steampunk era, dental tools were rudimentary and terrifying. The earliest extractions relied on simple pliers, often wielded by barbers, blacksmiths, or traveling tooth pullers. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just brute force, a steady hand, and a strong stomach. By the 17th and 18th centuries, specialized instruments like pelicans and tooth keys were developed. The pelican, named for its beak-like shape, gripped the tooth, while a lever applied twisting force to yank it free. The tooth key worked similarly, inserting into the mouth and rotating to dislodge the tooth. While innovative for their time, these devices often caused fractures, jaw injuries, and considerable suffering. As the 19th century dawned, the Industrial Revolution transformed even the field of dentistry. Inventors saw opportunity in gears, springs, and precision mechanics. The steampunk tooth puller was one of many attempts to replace the unpredictable strength of human hands with controlled mechanical power. At the same time, medicine itself was undergoing a mechanical renaissance. The 19th century saw a flood of new medical machines, some ingenious, some absurd. Bloodletting devices with rotating blades, mechanical leech applicators, electrified therapy chairs. Even steam-powered surgical tools were briefly explored. This burst of mechanization reflected a cultural optimism, the belief that science and machinery could tame nature's chaos, even inside the human body. Dentistry, with its visible physical challenges, was the perfect candidate for such experiments. And while most of these devices faded into obscurity, their aesthetic legacy lives on in steampunk fiction, art, and popular culture. In steampunk literature, the mechanical tooth puller symbolizes the genre's playful obsession with retro-futurism. Novels like The Difference Engine and Leviathan include bizarre medical contraptions that blend Victorian elegance with speculative absurdity. Artists craft intricate models of fictional dental devices, complete with polished brass and hissing steam vents. In animated films and cartoons, exaggerated dental machines appear as both comic relief and horror. Characters trapped in oversized dental chairs face whirring drills, giant pliers, and gear-laden arms that twitch ominously. These portrayals capture both our fear of dental pain and our fascination with mechanical complexity. Even modern video games reference the trope. Players explore abandoned clinics filled with creepy, rusted dental machinery, echoes of an imagined past where technology overreached into the intimate world of the body. Why does this imagery endure? Because dental machines embody a unique kind of anxiety, the fear of pain delivered impersonally, mechanically, without human warmth. The more elaborate the device, the greater the unease. Psychologically, humans fear losing control, especially over their own bodies. A dentist's skilled hands offer some comfort. A hulking machine removes that sense of personal care. The steampunk tooth puller magnifies this fear while adding a layer of absurdity. We can laugh at it because it's exaggerated, but the core unease remains familiar. At its heart, the steampunk tooth puller is both a relic and a mirror. It reflects our ongoing struggle to balance progress and empathy, efficiency and humanity. Our inventions aim to ease suffering, but sometimes they reveal how easily good intentions can spin into something wonderfully strange. And perhaps that's why we keep returning to these images, not to solve the problem, but to marvel at how creatively we've tried. There are few experiences on Earth as universally unsettling as the ground itself deciding to move. Floors buckle, walls sway, lamps dance ominously overhead. And yet, at some point in human history, someone said, what if we could practice that at home? Enter the Home Earthquake Simulator, a device that seems at first glance equal parts preparation and absurdity. Why would anyone willingly recreate the terrifying sensation of an earthquake in their living room? Because we're human. And humans are beautifully contradictory creatures who believe that if we can practice disaster, we can master it. The first seeds of the Home Earthquake Simulator didn't sprout in homes at all. They were planted in laboratories. Seismologists have long used shaking tables to study how buildings react to seismic waves. But in the late 20th century, as public awareness of earthquake preparedness grew, the idea of personal earthquake drills started to emerge. Governments and safety organizations built full-scale simulators for public education, safe, padded rooms where civilians could feel the rumble without the rubble. Eventually, a few entrepreneurial minds wondered, why not miniaturize this for home safety? Thus came early prototypes, small, motorized platforms for living rooms and garages. You could practice your drop, cover, and hold-on techniques while your bookshelves wobbled gently beside you. Simulating an earthquake isn't as simple as shaking the floor. Real seismic waves move in complex patterns. P waves, primary, fast, compressional. S waves, secondary, slower, rolling, more damaging. Surface waves, where the real chaos lives. A home simulator must balance safety with realism. Too much force and you've recreated the disaster, not the training. Too little, and you might as well be on a wobbly exercise machine. Inventors tinkered with hydraulic platforms, weighted pendulums, and gyroscopic systems. Japanese manufacturers led the charge, given the nation's constant earthquake risk. Some models even included sound effects, creaking beams, shattering glass, minus the actual danger. By the 1990s and 2000s, earthquake preparation culture went mainstream. Public drills, school programs, and even private sector offerings flourished. Entire buildings were constructed on giant shaking platforms to demonstrate resilience. Disaster theme parks in Japan allowed families to experience various catastrophes safely. And yes, a small market for home-use earthquake simulators quietly emerged. Catalogs featured tabletop simulators to educate children, office units to train workers, and ambitious DIY kits for survival enthusiasts. Oddly, they also became niche conversation starters. Would you like to try the simulator before coffee? Naturally, something this wonderfully strange could not avoid pop culture's embrace. In cartoons, characters are thrown comically around by malfunctioning simulators. In sitcoms, a home earthquake drill often ends with spilled coffee and dented pride. Anime and disaster movies feature sophisticated training chambers where heroes steel themselves for impending doom. Science fiction sometimes takes it even further, adding anti-gravity chambers or planet quake training rooms. Theme parks created thrilling rides inspired by earthquake simulation, turning genuine fear into managed excitement. The boundary between education and entertainment blurred deliciously. Why do we do this? Why replicate fear? Because control brings comfort. The unknown frightens us most, but rehearsal offers the illusion of mastery. Simulating earthquakes allows people to process anxiety in controlled doses. Like flight simulators for pilots, these devices train instinct. You might never face a real quake, but if you do, your body will remember what to do. There's also humor in the human response. Families laughing awkwardly as their living room wobbles, kids giggling at their parents' serious duck and cover drills. We turn fear into play, and through play, we reclaim agency. The home earthquake simulator is both ridiculous and profound. It represents our desire to prepare, even when preparation seems impossible. It shows our faith in technology to protect us from nature, and it reveals our gift for transforming dread into awkward laughter. In the end, perhaps that's the real lesson of the home earthquake simulator. We cannot stop the ground from moving, but we can practice, we can wobble, and we can meet the next quake with both caution and a strange, knowing smile. In many ways, the home earthquake simulator shares a kindred spirit with the outlandish world of steampunk medical devices, including the infamous mechanical tooth pullers often depicted in films, cartoons, and graphic novels. Just as these over-engineered dental contraptions whirl and buzz with an overwhelming array of levers, gears, and oddly placed brass fixtures, earthquake simulators reflect our ongoing fascination with taming chaos through elaborate machinery. In animated films and steampunk-inspired worlds, we often see characters strapped into vibrating contraptions that mimic seismic waves, surrounded by spinning gyroscopes and hissing steam valves. The visuals exaggerate the danger, but also celebrate the whimsical ambition behind these inventions. They offer a theatrical dramatization of human ingenuity and our odd sense of humor when confronting fear. In graphic novels and comics, the earthquake simulator sometimes appears as part of survivalist or futuristic training facilities where heroes brace themselves for disaster in comically intense fashion. The machines become exaggerated metaphors for the unpredictability of life and our desperate attempts to stay one step ahead. Psychologically, both the steampunk dental chair and the earthquake simulator tap into the same underlying fear: loss of control. There is something uniquely unsettling about surrendering your body to a machine, even when it's designed for your benefit. The very sight of these devices, oversized, humming, and mechanical, provokes anxiety not only because of what they do, but because they amplify the vulnerability we already feel. Yet, paradoxically, there's comfort hidden within that discomfort. These machines let us simulate danger while knowing we're still safe. They transform genuine fear into controlled experience, allowing us to face our anxieties with a buffer of humor, design, and predictability. Even as the room sways or the chair rattles, we know that someone engineered the chaos for us. And so, whether it's a vibrating dental apparatus or a living room that gently mimics seismic waves, these curious machines reflect humanity's beautiful absurdity, our need to confront what scares us, not by running from it, but by building wonderfully strange devices to dance with the danger. Imagine a beautiful morning, sitting in a cafe, watching the leaves gently fall to the ground. Gravity, that invisible yet powerful force, pulls the leaf back to its rightful place. You can't see gravity, but it's always there, silently pulling everything from the sky back to the earth. You sip your coffee, then pause to wonder, how could humans ever fly? If gravity keeps everything in place like this, how could humans fight it? Suddenly, one of your quirky friends looks up and says, "Why not design anti-gravity shoes?" You stare at him in surprise, but also curiosity. Anti-gravity shoes? What's that supposed to be? The story of the gravity-defying shoes begins here. At first, you'd think it's a crazy idea, but then you start to imagine these strange shoes. Shoes that could resist gravity and let people float without needing a spacecraft or any other flying device. This idea may sound absurd, but it's exactly what has driven humanity for centuries: the desire to transcend the physical limits of nature. From ancient myths like Icarus to Leonardo da Vinci's designs for flying machines, humans have always dreamed of soaring through the skies. But could shoes really do that? And why shoes? What makes shoes the ideal choice to resist gravity? Introducing the gravity-defying shoes is a blend of a lofty dream and a very practical human need. If humans can fly, perhaps these shoes are the next step. So how would we walk? And could these shoes really help us defy gravity like we hope? When you walk through the park, each step hits the ground, and you don't even think about gravity. Gravity is this invisible force, yet always present, pulling everything to the ground. Every step we take, whether light or heavy, is influenced by this force. Yet humans have always craved to overcome it. Could it be possible? Could we walk away from the ground, unburdened by gravity? Gravity has always been a part of our lives. It's an essential force in the universe. Yet its existence also drives some of humanity's greatest inventions. From Leonardo da Vinci's early experiments with bird wings to the Wright brothers inventing the airplane, humans have constantly experimented and developed technologies to overcome gravity. But a big question remains. If we could fly, what would we do with that power? Could it be as simple as walking on the ground, but at some height without worrying about gravity? And then the gravity-defying shoes were born. Not just a scientific product, but also a symbol of the boundless creativity of humanity. These shoes aren't like flying machines. They help you defy gravity with every step, even giving you the sensation of floating gently through the air. Creating the gravity-defying shoes wasn't a smooth path. From the first sketches, inventors faced countless difficulties. How could the shoes create enough thrust to resist gravity without making them too heavy? How could they ensure they'd be usable for extended periods without issues? And how could they be comfortable enough for people to walk around in? Inventors began by experimenting with ultralight materials that were strong enough to withstand the forces involved. New alloys and composite materials were tested to reduce weight while ensuring durability. Then came the search for an energy source strong enough to generate thrust against gravity, but not too bulky. A team of researchers in Japan, where earthquakes are common, started investing in this technology early on. They applied electromagnetic systems using powerful magnets to generate lift and help users walk without being pulled down by gravity. The first prototypes used hydraulic mechanisms and air cushions, but they weren't quite effective until one inventor discovered the combination of mini jet engines and ultralight composite materials. The next crucial step was adjusting balance during movement. The shoes had to be flexible enough so that users didn't feel off balance, yet strong enough to resist gravity. To achieve this, engineers used sensor technology to help the shoes adjust the thrust based on each step. When the gravity-defying shoes were finally launched, they were more than just a high-tech product. They became a symbol of extraordinary human creativity. The first users, athletes, adventurers, and thrill seekers, discovered that the shoes didn't just help them move faster. They gave them a freedom they had never experienced before. Imagine it's a Sunday morning and you're wearing your gravity-defying shoes, stepping outside and floating lightly down an empty street. You don't have to worry about walking on hard pavement or obstacles like potholes or pebbles, you just take a step and the shoes help you glide over any hurdle. In urban areas, people could use them to quickly navigate crowded streets. No more traffic jams or waiting in packed buses. Public transportation would start to become irrelevant as people could move independently without relying on vehicles, but doesn't stop at walking. The gravity-defying shoes also opened up new opportunities in sports. Extreme athletes use these shoes to perform higher jumps, longer leaps, or even fly in new sports events. Initially, it seemed like a joke, but the shoes eventually led to entirely new competitions we never imagined before. If these shoes could be described in one word, it would be dreamy but chaotic. They are proof that humanity never stops dreaming, and sometimes those dreams, although quirky and seemingly unrealistic, bring joy and wonder. While we may never fully escape gravity, at least we can fly a little, and that makes the world a lot more interesting. So the next time you feel tired of the stability of the ground, or when you face a long, dull day, imagine yourself floating in the gravity-defying shoes. Try walking in this world in a fresh way, even though you might have a bit of trouble getting used to flying, or not flying at first. But at least you'll have a great story to tell. The first time I walked in mid-air, I had a little incident. And who knows, maybe one day, gravity-defying shoes will become the must-have fashion item of the century, and you'll be the one to discover how to avoid traffic without needing a car. Always dream big, because dreams aren't just for those who know how to fly. As for you, you could just walk on air. Imagine a scorching summer afternoon. The sun is blazing, its rays piercing through the thick clouds, and you're desperately trying to find a hint of coolness in the stifling air. But suddenly, you spot a woman strolling through the park, wearing a fabric hat equipped with a small fan on top. No, it's not just any ordinary hat. It's a self-fanning bonnet, a quirky invention that you can't help but smile at when you see it. At that moment, we could say that this hat is the perfect combination of absurd creativity and a very real human need, staying cool on sweltering summer days. But the story of the self-fanning bonnet isn't just about a quirky fashion accessory. It's a reflection of a deeper part of human nature, the relentless creativity, no matter how inconvenient or humorous the invention might be. This story begins in the 18th century when the need for comfort on hot summer days in European cities became more pressing than ever. Women of that time, especially those in the upper classes, always wanted to maintain not just cleanliness, but also an elegant and refined appearance. However, there was one major problem: the heat. And of course, nothing could be worse than a long evening trying to keep your beautiful hat in place while your body sweats like a running faucet. So inventors of the time began to think about how to improve the situation. Perhaps in a quiet evening, while sitting in a lab with a flickering candle, one inventor had the idea, if a hat can't cool me down, why not make it fan me? And thus, the self-fanning bonnet was born, a humorous device, but a testament to humanity's unending creativity. It's impossible not to feel impressed when thinking about how inventors of the past tackled everyday problems and solved them with quirky devices. In the case of the self-fanning bonnet, it was a combination of style and technology, a charming creation of humor and innovation. Sure, the self-fanning bonnet wasn't a product everyone saw as essential, but for the women at outdoor parties in the blazing sun, this hat was their saving grace. Not only did it help keep their hats in place, but it also provided a gentle breeze that eased the intense heat of summer. However, the hat wasn't exactly something everyone could wear. It was bulky and odd. A small fan was attached to the top of the hat, leading to a complex system of wires, which definitely wasn't the ideal choice for those who loved simplicity. But still, no one could deny its unique feature. It wasn't just a fashion item, but a device that could make the wearer stand out in a crowd. The self-fanning bonnet wasn't a product designed for everyone, but at one point it did manage to capture the public's attention. Fashion designers quickly realized that combining a fashionable item with a practical function could lead to surprising results. One of the iconic inventions of that era was the creation of items that weren't just for decoration, but also offered utility to the user. The self-fanning bonnet was seen as a perfect example of this combination. And Of course, once this product gained some popularity, improved versions began to appear. Some hats not only fanned, but also allowed users to adjust the wind speed or even change the direction of the breeze based on their needs. To make this possible, inventors faced a new problem: how to maintain the hat's lightness and comfort while still keeping the fan feature. However, all these efforts shared one thing in common: the humor in using technology for an item that was supposed to be elegant. One can't help but laugh at the image of a lady wearing a stylish bonnet, yet sporting a tiny fan on top. Moving around in such a hat at a party or festival was definitely a scene that couldn't go unnoticed. Although the self-fanning bonnet never became a mainstream product in the consumer market, it had a profound impact on how we think about technology and creativity in design. What is often called crazy creativity sometimes leads to unexpected breakthroughs. Such a quirky device may not have been widely accepted, but it certainly drew attention, sparking the imagination of other inventors. The self-fanning bonnet can be said to have paved the way for innovations in the fashion and technology industries. Products that followed might have been less quirky, but they all started with ideas as wild as this one. And now, as we look back, the self-fanning bonnet is not just a quirky invention, but a reminder that humanity is always looking for ways to make life easier, even if sometimes those solutions are a little out there. Does all creativity need to be serious and practical? Not necessarily. Sometimes the weirdest inventions are the best gifts we can offer the world. So, would you try wearing a self-fanning bonnet to your next party? After all, if nothing else, you'd have a great story to tell about creativity and staying cool on those hot summer days. So we've gone through some of the quirky inventions from the 1800s, right? While they might not be useful for modern life, they show us one thing: human creativity knows no bounds. Don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more fascinating discoveries in the future. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Which invention did you find the most interesting? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.